happening in most human hierarchies, and you know that because you have comrades you joke with, you play with. You said that organizations that are functional aren't based on power. What are they based on? Well, not power. So not dominance. It's like, okay, I thought about that for about 2 years. It's like, oh, that's a really fundamental criticism, and I didn't realize that implicit Marxist presuppositions had been structuring biological thought, and that's exactly right. And so what's the proper hierarchy constituted by? What's not the expression of the will to power? That's basically the admission that satanic forces rule the world. It's the same idea. Well, what rules? Well, satanic forces rule hell, and yes, you can be successful as a hellish ruler. Now, whether you can maintain that, Franz de Waal, world's greatest primatologist, studies chimpanzees. They're tough, and they're male dominant, unlike bonobos. They're male dominant, so they're patriarchal hierarchies. Okay, rough, tough chimp can pound everybody flat, maintains the highest power through intimidation. He's got preferential sexual access to the females. He does that by chasing away the subordinates. It's like heaven. He's dominant. What happens to him? One day he has a bad day, and 2 subordinate males that he hasn't really been attending to and has been harassing quite a lot jump him, and they castrate him, and they tear him to pieces. That's what happens.
But it doesn't always happen.
Yes, it does.
Genghis Khan.
It depends on what you mean by always. Like, it's a time frame problem.
I mean, that guy.
Yeah, I know. He's like progenitor of a third of the human race. Yeah, I know. I understand.
I mean, he was successful being a dominator for his entire life and was responsible for the death of somewhere between 50 and 70 million people.
Yeah.
He changed the carbon footprint of the planet Earth during his lifetime because he killed so many people.
Yeah. Well, let's not underestimate the utility of oppression as a means to ruling hell. We can agree on that. But, I mean, you're asking an absolutely germane question. In the book of Exodus, the Pharaoh is a tyrant. But he's up against God. And the Pharaoh loses. And you might think, well, what does that mean? Well, it's complicated. It's a complicated story. That's why it's been around for like 3,000 years. And why it's the fundamental narrative, for example, it was the narrative that black Christians really identified with in the United States, which is something that's really worth thinking about, the fact that that's the case. The Pharaoh is tortured by God. Well, what's God? Well, we said already, at least to some degree, God is the amalgamation of all that is good. I'm not speaking religiously when I say that. I'm speaking conceptually.
Okay.
God is the union of all things that are good. Okay, but that's not conceptual exactly, because that's also something that you exist in a relationship to and that you act out. It's not just an idea. Okay, so God is that spirit that calls to Abraham to have the adventure of his life instead of languishing in his father's tent, so it's called to adventure. It's truth. It's the burning bush. It's the psychedelic experience. It's God against the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh is a totalitarian, and he keeps imposing his edicts, running contrary to freedom, promoting slavery, let's say. Well, the kingdom fractures and crumbles continually. And you might say, well, time frame's a problem, man. Maybe you can be a successful tyrant even over the course of your lifetime. But maybe you doom your country to death. You doom your country to hell. Is that success? It depends on what you mean success is, because these things do depend on definitions.